Garage floor tiles look great, but do they actually hold up if you really use your garage? This video is going to be an update after about a year of hard use after installing these Vevor plastic floor tiles in my New England garage. After going over my experience with these tiles and all the damage that I've done to it after doing about 15 oil changes, several brake jobs, and a bunch of other random DIY projects in here, I'm going to be cleaning this floor to show you how well it comes back to life with a simple cleaning with a mop. This video will cover a bunch of frequently asked questions that I got in the comments section of my install video on these tiles. These questions include, but are not limited to, how do the garage floor tiles hold up? Do they get water trapped under them? What happens if you spill oil, antifreeze, or brake fluid on them? Can you use jack stands on these tiles? Are these tiles easy to clean? Do they warp in high heat or sunlight? What happens if you turn your wheels back and forth on them, especially if you have a heavy vehicle? And finally, after a year of hard use and abuse of these tiles, would I recommend them to you? For a little bit of background on these, before I get into the pros, cons, and my experience with them, these tiles are the solid non-flow-through tiles from Vevor. I picked these tiles out because they're about $2 a square foot or less, which makes them a lot cheaper than other garage floor tile options, and they look almost the same, and I wanted to try them out to transform this garage and see if they held up. That said, I did reach out to Vevor and they did send me a few boxes of tiles, but most of this floor I did end up paying for myself, and I want to share that honest experience with you, being an avid car enthusiast that does tons of projects in my garage. Alright, to talk about my experience with these tiles, I'm going to walk around and show you all of the damage that's been done in the last year or so working with these tiles. The first area I want to look at is this front edge right here, where cars pull in and out of this garage. The reason I want to show you guys this is you might notice that there's no angled ramp or anything, and it's just a step from the original concrete up onto the tiles. Vevor actually does not make a transition for this, so I was worried about that front edge cracking and breaking. And if you look along this, you really can't see any damage from pulling cars in and out. And some of my cars are on the heavier side, like my Volkswagen Touareg. So overall, this is an area that I actually thought was going to be a lot more damage than it was after a year of using my garage, and it really did hold up pretty good. Another thing you might see while you're looking at these tiles is that in general, they do look a little bit dirty, especially some of the lighter colors and actually some of the darker colors as well. This medium gray, in my opinion, looks the best. But again, we're going to be cleaning up the tiles at the end of this video. Let me walk around and show you where I've done some jobs on this floor so you can see sort of the extent of the dirtiness, the stains, and the damage. So if you look over here, you can see some stains that sort of look like rust. The reason it looks like rust is because I did a couple brake jobs in here, and this is what was left on the floor after giving it a nice thorough sweep. Now, this didn't come up just from sweeping. Some of that brake dust and rust did sort of embed in the floor, but I'm going to be mopping this later in this video to see if that comes up. Other areas that I want to take a look at is over here, sort of in the center of the garage, and this is where I do oil changes. Frequently, the motor will sit right here. I'll do oil changes on this floor, and oil will drip onto these tiles. Here, you could see a little bit of staining from some of the oil changes that I've done. After I do an oil change, I would wipe everything right up, and this is what's left. One thing I do notice is a lot of the staining is actually along the lines of the tiles where they come together, which makes me think that some of that oil is getting trapped sort of in those little gaps there and working its way back up when it gets wet or something like that. Overall though, if it just drips right on the solid surfaces, these tiles are very easy to clean. Again, I usually just wipe them up and then use a broom, sweep dust over it, and it takes the remaining oil out with it. So overall, these things are certainly easy to clean, but I do get a little bit of staining there. At the end of this video, I'm going to be lifting up some of these tiles to see if there's water under them, oil under them, or anything like that, because that is one of my biggest concerns with these tiles. Other than that though, I mean, it's definitely a little bit dusty in here, but it's a lot less bad than if I were sweeping the concrete floor that's deteriorating underneath these tiles. So overall, one of my main reasons for getting these tiles was to make this garage easier to clean, and I really do think, especially from a sweeping perspective, that they achieve that. All right, so the next frequently asked question that I got is, what happens if I turn my steering wheel back and forth on the tiles? Now, I got my Volkswagen Touareg in here. This is a pretty heavy car at around 4,700 to 4,800 pounds, and I'm gonna get in there and turn my wheel back and forth without driving the car. So this is basically worst case scenario. It's just gonna be the wheels turning back and forth, and we'll see what happens to these tiles. This is something that I honestly don't think I've really done much, because I mostly just pull in and out of this space here, and then the space over here is mostly for just working on cars. So we're gonna test that and see what happens. Let's do it. Here we go, turning the wheel back and forth. Again, this is a pretty heavy vehicle. I'll move backwards just a little bit. All right, so now let's go take a look at the floor. Again, this isn't something I normally do. You definitely could see where I was turning the tire back and forth. Actually, it was a little bit wet there from just having some, I guess, water from when it was raining yesterday on the tire. But the tiles all look nice and flat here, so it's really not something I'm too concerned with. I haven't noticed any tiles picking up from moving cars around, turning tires on here, or anything like that. So yeah, if you're concerned about that, I really wouldn't be. The Touareg's a pretty heavy vehicle, and I haven't had an issue. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of damage to these tiles is damage from jacks and jack stands. So if you put your car up on jacks, you're obviously putting a lot of weight on a very small surface area on top of that tile, and this did do some damage to my tiles. So as you can see here, there are a bunch of L marks from where I put my cars on jack stands, and this is where those jack stands just sunk down into these tiles a little bit. This isn't ideal. This is something that I really was hoping would not happen, but I will say that all of the marks here were from working on heavier vehicles like my Touareg, not from lighter vehicles like my Miatas. And also, if you're doing this and you're concerned about jack stands sinking into the floor and leaving marks, you could always put a piece of plywood or a piece of aluminum underneath your jack stands or something like that to spread out the weight of the car and make them not sink in. So overall, it definitely does mark up the floor with jack stands. It's not something I'm overly concerned about, and I haven't seen any damage or anything from just the jack itself. It's really when you put that weight on such a small surface area like the jack stands. But if you're worried about that, you definitely could put something under the jack. From a safety standpoint, I've never had these things crack and have like the vehicle drop or anything like that. But again, if you're worried about that, put something underneath the jack stands, ideally something non-slip that'll spread out the weight, and it really shouldn't be that bad. Another thing that I did notice in terms of damages is I did manage to scratch the tiles pretty good right here. They're not scratched to the point where it's scratched through the floor. However, there is a pretty good gouge in here, and what that was a screw that was coming through a 2x4. I dragged that board across the floor because I was lazy, didn't feel like lifting it. There are a bunch of other boards on top of it, and it did gouge up the floor. It's really not that bad. Again, it didn't go right through the floor, but it did leave a noticeable mark. So with any sort of sharp object or anything like that, you do want to be careful. And then finally, the last thing that I get a lot of questions about is, how do these tiles hold up in high heat? Do they warp? Do they move around? And things like that. So I will say that I'm in New England, so I don't get extreme temperatures, but we have had a couple 100-degree days and stuff, and this garage doesn't have an AC in it, so it does get pretty hot in here. And I haven't noticed any warping, any flexing of these tiles or anything like that. The only area that doesn't sit perfectly flat is actually right here. And this right here is where there's a dip in the floor, so the tiles didn't sit perfectly flat on it. Again, one of the reasons that I went with these tiles is I didn't need to prep the floor, and I was able to put these tiles directly on the concrete without worrying about any sort of prep at all on the floor. All I did was sweep it and then put these tiles down, which for me saved me a ton of prep time, and it really made it make sense to put these tiles down. All right, so what I'm gonna do to clean the garage is first sweep it to get all of the large dust and debris off, and then I'm gonna mop it with this mop bucket, and I'm gonna do water and just a little bit of Simple Green cleaner in here to try to help get some of that oil off and hopefully just do a little bit of a deeper clean than if I just used water. So now I'm gonna sweep this thing out. This, I would say, is sort of general, more frequent maintenance. I would sweep this garage maybe every 2 to 4 weeks. I'm not super picky if it gets a little bit dusty, but it is easy to clean. So I'm gonna show you guys that now. If you come over here, you could see all the stuff that's getting swept up. And again, this is really easy because the dust doesn't really stick to the tiles. The tiles don't create dust like the concrete underneath did, since it's an older, worn concrete pads. So yeah, it sweeps up pretty nice and easy without too much trouble with just a normal broom. So I'm gonna go through, sweep up this whole garage, and then once that's done, I'll start my mopping. All right, so now I'm sweeping this up just into a dustpan. Again, you can see that this stuff doesn't really stick to the floor, which is really nice. It is very easy to sweep, but there is some staining underneath that I'm hoping mopping is gonna take out. Now we're at the point where I've sweeped everything up pretty decent, and I'm gonna start mopping this floor. Now, this is gonna be interesting because, as I mentioned, I am worried about water sort of soaking through this floor, but I think this is the best thing to do. So I'm gonna go over it, mop the whole thing, and then we'll see how it looks once I'm done mopping it up. So I can tell, even just from doing this, that some of the dirt's coming up, not all of it, especially on the lighter tiles. It does look like even just a quick pass with the mop isn't picking it all up, but it should be a lot better. I'm gonna keep going here and we'll see where it ends up once I'm done mopping this whole floor. All right, so as a general feeling while mopping this, again, not everything's coming up, and the areas over here where I noted earlier that there were some oil stains, I don't think I put enough Simple Green in because there's still an oil stain. The water's not really sitting down on those areas. It's definitely making it better, but I probably should have done a slightly higher concentration of Simple Green. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just gonna go with this and show you guys what the floor looks like at the end. If you wanna use any higher concentrations of Simple Green or different cleaners, you definitely could do that to get a better clean on your floor. But for me, I'm just doing a light concentration and giving it a quick mop, not like a crazy thorough mop with a brush or anything like that. And I think you will see that there are some areas like here where I did breaks, here where I did oil, that there will still be some staining, but I do think it'll be a lot better than it was at the beginning. If you come over here and check out this mop bucket, you'll see that this water is pretty dirty in here. And the mop is picking up a ton of stuff off of the floor. But again, it's not 100% clean, but it is a pretty good improvement. All right, guys, I am behind the camera now rather than in front of it, but the floor has dried, and this is what it looks like. It is definitely an improvement after being mopped, but there are still some spots where you could still see oil stains over here. You could still see this area here where I did those breaks. But overall, it looks really good, and I'm pretty happy with it. If I wanted to be really picky, I definitely could go over it again with fresh water, but it is a garage that gets used all the time, and I need to start working on my V8 Miata in here. So I'm gonna say that is good enough for me. Now, there is a few things I wanna show you. I do wanna lift up some of these tiles and see if there's anything underneath them. I actually have a drain here in the floor. So right here, these tiles just pop up and out of place. And I want to show you that underneath there, if I get down here, you could see that there is some water that gets trapped underneath these tiles. Now, it's not absolutely soaked, but there is a noticeable amount of water that sits under there. I don't know if that's from the mopping or if that's just from driving cars in and out after it rained. But that is one of my major concerns with these tiles. It's not a deal breaker for me because this concrete pad underneath is not in the best shape, and I don't think water sitting on it is going to be the end of the world, but let us know down below what you think about that. But anyway, yes, you do get some water underneath this stuff. I can try to pull up some more areas of the floor. You could actually see a little bit of water in those creases there. Let me put the camera down and we'll see what else is underneath here. All right, so lifting up a large section of tile here, you could see that there is definitely a moderate amount of water sitting under this, and there's actually a lot of dirt right here that sort of collected through the crack. That is the piece that sort of free floats rather than is installed. But yeah, looking under here, it's definitely leaking through to the concrete underneath. To me, like I said, it's not a huge deal, but it is definitely something noticeable and something to consider. Just so you guys can see what I'm seeing, it's dry there, and then there are areas that are damp. Over on this side, it's actually a lot more damp. And again, you could see the areas where the tiles were sitting, where some light dust and stuff is falling through. So these tiles aren't totally waterproof, that's for sure. It actually does smell a little bit musty under there too, which is a bit of a concern. If you get the flow-through tiles, you probably wouldn't have this issue. But yeah, as you can see, there is water collecting underneath these tiles. Let us know down below what you think about that. It's not like I'm flooding this garage. It's not like I'm washing anything in here or anything like that. So that's just a little bit of rainwater that collects under there. I will say that with salt and stuff like that during the winter, that also will collect under here. And it's probably not a bad idea to lift this floor out in big sections and really let your garage dry out once in a while. I personally haven't done it, but seeing this now, it might not be a bad idea. And now for the final question that I get all the time, do I like these tiles and do I think they're worth it? And to answer that question, I would say yes, I am happy with these tiles. I'm really happy with the color scheme that I picked. I picked 3 different colors, made this pattern, and I like how it looks. They do require little to no prep for the surface that you're putting them on, which is a big reason why I got them. They're easily replaceable if something breaks. Honestly, it's even pretty easy to pick up the tiles if I wanted to dry and clean the floor underneath. At this point right now, I'm not going to do that, but if this is something that's a deal breaker to you, you could just lift these things up by section and dry out or sweep out underneath the tiles. It is very easy to clean off dirt, oil spills, and other spills on these tiles compared to raw concrete that stuff would soak into and stain. That said, again, oil and that stuff will soak through, so you want to be careful of that. In my opinion, they do look absolutely great. I am really happy with how this looks. They've been nice and durable, and it gives this garage a really unique sort of high-end look. And yeah, I'm happy with them. I do have these linked down in the description below if you want to check out these exact tiles for your garage. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied. Another thing I was considering is kicking around with a test of getting a bunch of different name brand tiles, testing them for drop tests, fluid tests to pour stuff on them and see if maybe a better name brand tile doesn't let as much fluid through. But let me know in the comments down below if you would like to see a video on that. If not, that wraps up this video. Let me know if you have any further questions or comments down in the comment section down below. Like this video if you liked it, and I hope you have a great day.